I'll read first because Sheila's book is newer. And we decided that we would read each other's work. And so as I'm reading, I'm going to wonder if this was really the voice that Sheila heard as she was writing this scene. But let me start. Maybe I should give a little bit of an overview of the book, The Bay of Foxes. It is, the main character is named Dawit. He is an Ethiopian who has fled the revolution, it's 1978, and he's fled the revolution in Ethiopia to come to France as a refugee. And he has met a famous writer that he's read since childhood, who's named M. And this is a particular moment from in their interactions. He goes to live with her. He establishes a routine. Every morning he rises early, runs, buys a croissant and a café au lait from the cafe on the corner, and then returns to work at M's desk. He opens her mail for her, answers it, takes out the books she has sent. There are packets from her agent, who sends M her books in translation. "What language is this?" he asks M, taking a book out of a packet, lifting it up. "No idea," she says and laughs. "I can't even remember which book it is." He writes thank you letters to her agent, signs her name. She asks him to answer the phone for her too. An answering service is so impersonal, she says. No one should have to talk to a recorded voice on the phone, and she doesn't want to be disturbed. "Just say you are me, and say something polite," she says. "You're such a diplomat, and a good actor. You sound just like me anyway," she says, grinning at him with amusement, listening to him speak with her hoarse, trembling man's voice, saying "allo" as she does, followed by polite things. He does not find it very difficult. He has already imitated her style as a teenager, writing in his diary. "How lovely to hear from you. I've been thinking about you, darling, and wondering how you were," he says, leaning back in her Queen Anne armchair with its pink silk covering, putting his arms on the wooden armrests. He stares out at the leaves on the chestnut trees, which hang down like ripe fruit, all ready to be plucked. They remind him of the mango trees in the garden of his childhood. "You do that perfectly. You could fool my mother if she were alive," she says. Generally, he takes care of all the mundane details of her life, leaving her free to write, like so many literary couples before them. He considers himself naturally easygoing, pliable up to a point. He aims to please. He is used to trying to ingratiate himself, to question, to listen, and to give good advice. He was an only child who was often in the company of intelligent adults, courtiers in the various palaces of the emperor or on trips abroad. He learned at an early age what to say to please his sophisticated father, who had loved him in a distracted, distant way, and how to calm his mother's constant anxiety. Only Solo, though older, followed him around the palace gardens and into the hills. Only Solo deferred to him completely, obeying his every wish. Dawit adapts to M's schedule, her way of life. He listens to her, gives her good advice, and makes himself available to her. But there is a part of him she never reaches, a secret part that watches her with ironic detachment. Mentally, he takes notes on the movements of her fine hands, her every expression, her particular needs. He speaks her language perfectly, but she does not know a word of his. Despite her upbringing in Somalia, she has never taken the trouble to learn any of the languages of the country, he notes. He comes to know all of her intimate life, her work, her desires, but she knows very little about him. Like all colonizers, he thinks, she is ultimately the dupe.
Okay, so I'm going to read from Maaza's first novel, and we'll explain afterwards how we met, and also how I came to be writing about Ethiopia. Her book takes place something about the same period, but in this section that I'm going to read, Haile Selassie is still alive, though becoming increasingly confused and not really quite aware of what's going on around him, which is, of course, the whole revolution, the time in Ethiopia when Haile Selassie was deposed and the communist government, the Derg, the committee, took over. So this is, we're in Haile Selassie's mind here. The emperor wasn't sure how these soldiers had crept into his meetings. Somehow they managed to crawl out of their barracks and into Menelik Palace, their distaste for educated and cultured men clear in their haughty glares. They'd been meeting at the 4th Division headquarters when one day a few of their select had driven in their jeeps onto his grounds, pushed past his startled guards, and settled themselves around his table. This defiance, I'm going to have difficulty pronouncing some of these names, brought, you're going to have to pronounce it for me. Okay. Brought Indalkacha's already dwindling cabinet to a stunned paralysis. Indalkacha, stripped of all semblance of power, most of his ministers jailed, was forced to resign, and then was arrested himself. These low-level officers selected another one of his men, Mikhail Imru, as prime minister, all the while bowing in deference and murmuring their unending loyalty. He'd become confused by how many they were, these men in dark green fatigues who now cradled his elbow in palace meetings and whispered that he must remember their demands, he must remember his people. He no longer knew their numbers, did not know which of these earnest soldiers had taken control of his radio station and breathed these words into every home and restaurant in his city. We do not believe in an eye for an eye. We will bring to trial all those who misuse their power. There can be justice without bloodshed. And was it only the wind, or had his people sent joyous shouts into the night sky? In the whirl and speed of so much happening so fast, the bodies of these men had disintegrated into mere voices in his ear. They seemed molded out of the shadows that clung to dark corners of his palace, drifting in and out of his line of vision, leaving traces of smoke and the scent of burning wood in their wake. They talked to him in his sleep, their words nestling against his head and burrowing into his brain. The emperor slid through his days, shaking the noises loose from his ears, trying to bat the prodding requests away. Let us help you lead the country. You are old and we are young. You are one, we are many. We will do everything you ask. The pressure built in Emperor Haile Selassie's head, drilling behind his eyes. Thoughts collapsed into 100 scattered words, floating in front of his face, pinned onto pages that were shoved under his pen. He found himself numbed by the honeyed smiles that sliced his resistance more than their hard, sharp eyes. Your name here, and here, these officers he'd never known before said, sign this and dissolve your ministry and the Crown Council. We have a new and better way for you to rule. They were mere men instructing God's chosen, the monarch, with blood that could be traced to wise King Solomon and the Bible. Soon the voices floated from the radio and called his best men to submit to the wishes of all and go to jail. There will be no bloodshed, the radio said, only justice. His senators and judges, cabinet members and ministers, his noblemen began to leave their posts and walk with grim confidence to turn themselves in. Sign here and here. No time to read. We must hurry. Trust us. Don't sit. There is no rest. We must show that change is coming. Don't you hear your people? The emperor stood. The emperor walked. The emperor followed the backs of the uniformed men from one meeting into another. What has become of us? He asked himself. When will angels lead us out of this fray? Emperor Haile Selassie tried his best to become immobile, to stand rigid without following, to sit without signing, to watch without nodding, without expression, without revealing the panic that fluttered through him. But things kept moving forward. We must not be anything other than what we are, he reminded himself. We are, and so we will be. We're here in these days of locusts and noise, but it has been written that this shall pass, and so it will.